Senior biodefense researcher takes his own life after learning that he was about to face charges in a series of deadly anthrax attacks following 9/11. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams has been following these developments for 7 years, I should say, Pete.
Yeah, just about.
As sad as it's been, this hits very close to home because we at NBC suffered the results of the anthrax attacks. Take us through the story and how it evolved overnight.
Well, what happened is that earlier this week, the lawyer for this scientist, the scientist's name is Bruce Ivans. He's 62. For 3 decades, he's been a microbiologist, civilian researcher for the U.S. Army's research laboratory at Fort Detrick that does research on bioterrorism materials. He was an expert in anthrax. He helped the Army develop the anthrax vaccine that was widely given to U.S. troops who deploy overseas. And his lawyer was told by the Justice Department that they were preparing criminal charges against his client. Now, this is not an uncommon thing, Andrea. In many criminal cases, when the Justice Department is getting ready to prosecute someone, they tell the lawyer for the other side and say, you know, this is what we're preparing to do. Talk us out of it if you can. But after receiving notice that the Justice Department was preparing charges, Dr. Ivans took his own life, and apparently an overdose of painkillers, and died on Tuesday. And this has all come out now in the last several hours, first reported by the Los Angeles Times.
It just occurs to me, tell me if I'm wrong about this, was the collection of evidence against this scientist what led the Justice Department to definitively clear Dr. Stephen Hatfill, who was unfairly accused,
yes,
and agree to the settlement of millions of dollars to him?
Yes. I mean, as we reported at the time, with the Hatfill settlement was about a month ago. They would never have settled with Hatfill, who was famously called a person of interest by the previous Attorney General John Ashcroft. They would never have let him off the hook had they not decided that they had pretty much, in their opinion, solved the case. Now, this is going to be controversial. Paul Kemp, who was the lawyer for Dr. Ivans, says that this just shows what happens when the government bears down on someone. They had searched his house. They had searched other things that he was connected with. He'd been under surveillance. And he said, you know, if this had ever gone to trial, he would have been able to prove his innocence. So, you know, this will never go to trial. The evidence will never be tested.
Where does his death leave the case, and what kind of evidence are we talking about? Because I seem to recall back when we were first doing the anthrax investigations, every type of anthrax has its own signature.
Well, that is what the government believes is at the heart of the case. Because what they've done is an enormous amount of scientific study of anthrax. The government has learned a lot here. The FBI has enlisted help from microbiologist experts all around the world, and they believe that they could, in essence, crack the DNA code of the anthrax, and that gave them a sort of scientific fingerprint, which they could use to trace back. They tell us they believe that the anthrax spores, the deadly, terribly buoyant spores, that was what made them so deadly. They just sort of stayed in the air and people could inhale them. That they were actually made at the laboratory in Fort Detrick, and they believe the science can take them right into the room where it was made. That's the theory of the government's case. That is why they focused on Dr. Ivans. And
was this case, the case that was focused against this scientist, for the Washington, D.C., the Senate office anthrax case?
Yes, all of them.
As well as the New York cases?
Yes,
involving...
all of them. Well, one of the theories of the case, some of the investigators believe that Dr. Ivans, who was one of the main government researchers, who ironically helped the FBI study the anthrax material, and if this is true, if he was the one who sent it, then he's in the position of, in essence, studying his own evidence. It's a very unusual situation in law enforcement. But he was one of the experts on anthrax, and the theory was that he felt that people weren't taking the whole question of anthrax vaccine seriously enough, that he was somewhat frustrated that he could never test it on humans, and that if there was a kind of anthrax outbreak, then it would show the need to test the anthrax vaccine, his multi-anthrax vaccine that he had developed that could work against more than one kind of strain, that he would test that in people. Now, it's also very possible, investigators believe, that if it was he who mailed them, whoever mailed them, never realized precisely how deadly they would be. That they would cause this very serious inhalation form of anthrax. It's one thing to touch it, you get outbreaks on your skin, which is what happened to our NBC News employee. But when you breathe it in, it gets in your lungs, and that's what happened to the 5 people who died from it. It's very possible that he had no idea that this would be the result.
Boy, it's so interesting. And Pete, you've been on this from the beginning, and we thank you because the sad story today is for that, the death of this man, right, his family, his connections, but also for investigators that we may never know.
Right, but I think that they believe this closes the case.
Pete Williams, thank you so much.